our politics are so kind of centered around the president,
Right.
and every the biggest political event is always the presidential election every 4 years. We think of the Biden era, the Obama era, the Trump era, and I think there's a lot of reason for that. And there's no other none of the other branches of government have kind of one person attached to them. None of them are elected truly by kind of a national mandate. To the extent the Electoral College is still for the most part a national mandate. Certainly not after kind of a national campaign. And
Hmm.
yet, the reality is that presidents are powerful, but not all powerful figures. And I do
Right.
think that's why you see this kind of huge excitement that's always just inevitably followed by this letdown, because I think the politicians overpromise, and also people just assume, people who support and oppose the candidate just assume that the president will get in there and be able to do anything they want. When the
Yeah.
reality is there are courts that will be able to stop a lot of executive action, and then a lot of other things need to go through Congress, which is just really difficult to do. And I think you talk to, I think, Trump supporters who I think have huge kind of visions of what the Trump presidency will be able to execute. And it's not as though what he's done. I think he has done some fairly consequential things so far, but nothing, nothing too far outside the bounds of. I mean, certainly, with executive action, is always going to inevitably be mostly undoing previous executive actions, things like that. There's exceptions like birthright citizenship, but those are being tied up in the courts.
Hmm.
Um, and I think a lot of the other kind of bigger visions you might have are stopped. And then you also think of Trump critics. You talk to some people who oppose Trump and get very concerned. Oh, Donald Trump has been elected. That must mean Obamacare is going to be repealed, and that must mean same-sex marriage is suddenly going to be made illegal. And the reality is, no, the president can't do that single-handedly, and in those two examples, doesn't have the political will to do that, either of those things at all.
Right.
And just presidents, I think, operate within a much more narrow constraint of both kind of procedural constraints and political constraints than I think our popular conception of the presidency kind of allows for.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, do think of kind of FDR um, style presidencies, of presidents who just kind of completely take over the national conversation and completely kind of enact sweeping change. And some presidents can still take over the national conversation. Some
Right.
presidents can't, like Joe Biden. Donald Trump is
Right.
president who can. But
Yeah.
that isn't always equivalent to policy change. That takes a lot more different checks and balances that our system have built in. Sometimes the frustration of parties when they're in power, and then suddenly when they're out of power, they're like, "Oh yeah, that's why we have the filibuster."